We're going to try something a little different tonight, so everyone bear with me, especially Anthony, who has to sit through this, as difficult as it is for him. In 1846, 50 cardinals of the Catholic Church elect the man that the world would call the liberal pope. He was supposed to be a reformer, a moderate, and a friend of progress. Italian nationalists were cheering in the streets of Rome. Newspapers across Europe ran glowing profiles of the man. Even the Protestants celebrated. The Catholic Church, they said, had finally caught up with the modern world. Yet, 18 years later, that same man would issue the most uncompromising condemnation of the modern world ever yet written by a pope. What happened? What changed? How does the man that the revolutionaries celebrated in 1846 become the man who, on the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, on December 8th, 1864, hands every bishop in the world a list of 80 errors and instructs them to handle these ideas, quote, as they would handle the contagion of a fatal pestilence? That's the story of Pope Pius IX, the encyclical Quanta Cura, and the Syllabus of Errors.
Man, I'm telling you guys right now, this is Rob's series, man. Like this is going to be Rob's series. Like we've been talking a lot about what direction we're going to take with this, and what we're thinking is we want to kind of go through the timeline and build our way up to the council, essentially, right? So there's Leo the 13th did a ton of encyclicals, and Pius IX, there's kind of like a gap. This is, Rob was just telling me, like, this is like his big major encyclical, and then there's really not much else that we're going to cover under Pius IX, really. But Pius IX is Pope during Vatican I.
Yep.
So it's, and then you're just going to start getting hit with all the Leo the 13th encyclicals, and like, we're thinking Rerum Novarum is going to be kind of like one of the crown jewels of the series. So we're not going to get to that immediately. But yeah, it's really, I'm excited for this because we're going to learn about a lot of history that I never knew. Rob sends me like a small historical synopsis of this, and he sends me the encyclical. So I read through the encyclical. I read through it twice. And I read the small historical synopsis, but Rob basically is writing a script for this.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of work going into this. It's not, we're actually doing show prep. It's not like scanning Twitter for like things to talk about. So these shows are not going to get a lot of views. Those of you who are watching, like even right now, there's 130 people watching, and that's insanely low for us.
We were getting 500
Yeah.
with Daniel and Josh.
Yeah, so what we are going, like, and also these shows aren't very clippable, so it's not like we're gonna have clips to put out after. So we do have the donate button if you are enjoying this series. It's going to be they're going to be deep dives, but I hope that people enjoy them. They're not going to be viral content by any stretch of the imagination, but we do have a donate button up on our website. We always appreciate super chats, things like that.
You can scan this right here, actually, if you wanted to bring you right to.
Yeah, just because we're going to be taking a pay cut on these, and we are still doing local shows after these, though. So we're going to try to keep this at an hour, and then we're going to head over to locals. On locals, I mean, we have to talk Pelican.
Oh boy,
Pelican, man! I mean, this is just crazy. What came out for the Pelican news today was just nuts. So we have to talk Pelican over there. I also have a John Deloney clip that.
Oh yeah!
In case things go south on locals, I got a banger John Deloney clip. So so we're gonna do the historical series now. Essentially, what we're doing is trying to view history from the lens of the papacy, and watching world events and seeing how the church and the papacy specifically handled these world events. Before we get to it, though, I have another a success story from Knick Knack.
Another one,
another huge success story. So I have another friend.
Thank you, Molly.
Thank you very much, Molly. Appreciate that very much. Jim Pine. Jim Pine is a friend of the show. Another total freaking loser. Like total freaking loser of a man.
Was a friend of the show.
Listen, gave the man some knickknacks. The guy is a freaking fashion influencer now.
I
just
did
from
see
the
that on Twitter.
Jim Pine went from being total absolute loser, tries knickknacks, and all of a sudden he's a fashion influencer. So if you guys can, go check out Jim Pine's his Twitter handle. He's now a fashion influencer. He's doing mass fits. It's unbelievable. Knickknack is like changing lives out there, guys. Changing lives. We had one guy was an incel. He's now on the verge of getting engaged. I'm hearing this other guy didn't even, he was wearing sweatpants and flip-flops to mass, and now he's a fashion influencer. So knickknack.com, use code AB 25% if you want to get away from being the loser that you've always been. Knickknack will transform you.
They help me when I wake up at 5 a.m. to read this stuff when my kids aren't awake.
Look, it made Rob go from never talking on the show to literally hosting a series. I mean, Rob went from never saying a word to taking over the freaking show. Knickknack is miraculous. That's what I'll say.
Oh my gosh.
Yes, they're basically sacramentals. They work miracles. So go to knickknack.com, use code AB25% for 25% off your first purchase. Once you guys are hooked and addicted to the nicotine, because nicotine is an addictive substance and knickknacks do contain nicotine. Once you guys are addicted,
you are getting good at this.
Off. Yeah,
you are
10% off. Use code AB10 for that 10% off once the addiction kicks in. If you got to quit smoking, I can't tell you this will work as a smoking cessation device, but it totally does. The other thing is our favorite Black Monk rosaries. Black Monk rosaries. I'm trying to make it so that you guys don't want to fast forward through. Like most shows, you want to just skip past the promos. We're trying to make it a little bit interesting for you guys. So go to Black Monk Rosary, get 10% off an amazing Black Monk Rosary by going to blackmonkrosaries.com using code Avoiding Babylon at checkout. I do not. Well, Rob and I both do not promote products that we do not love.
Yeah.
I mean, I love my Black Monk Rosary. If you do not have a Black Monk Rosary, you are not on the team. They are great gifts for communion and confirmation, which this time of year is that. Good Father's Day gift too. Father's Day is coming up. Really good for Father's Day.
Or wedding season, right? It's supposed to be, isn't it wedding season? Great gift for a couple getting married too.
So, all right, head over to Black Monk Rosary, get 10% off by using code Avoiding Babylon at checkout. So, all right, so Rob, I want you to take us through and set the stage a little bit. I think even the intro was super interesting because Pope Pius IX is kind of a concession candidate, right? Like there's kind of like a deadlock between the conservative and the liberal, and they
actually really similar to what we have heard so far about how modern Leo was elected, right? Kind of.
Yeah. So, so they're kind of deadlocked between conservatives and liberals. You see this fight in the church already going on.
Yeah.
And it was like God was able to put the right men in position to hold this force off for a significant period of time.
And we'll get into it, but in this week, there's another liberal celebrity priest that Pius deals with. Just like there was what was his name last week? Lamine.
Yeah.
That Gregory dealt with. So yeah.
Yeah, who he eventually names in one of his encyclicals, right?
Yep.
But what's interesting is Rob and I both, when reading the encyclical, like I think Mirari Vos was like a little more like you would think the syllabus of so what we're covering is it's both it's both the Syllabus of Errors and
Quanta Cura.
Quanta
Cura is the actual encyclical, and then the Syllabus of Errors was attached to the encyclical as it was sent to all the bishops of the world.
Yeah, and we both think Mirari Vos was a little bit like harsher and like really dealing with this stuff, but they're definitely dealing with some of the same themes. So go ahead, Rob, take us into this.
Okay, so Pius IX, he is born. He's born as Giovanni Maria. I think it's Mastai Ferretti. So when I name him, I might just name him Ferretti. We'll see. But so he's born in 1792. So that's 30 years after his predecessor Gregory XVI was born, but it's 3 years after the storming of the Bastille. So already, this is only our second encyclical we're talking about, and we already have a pope who's being born into like a world that's engulfed by the flames of the revolution that Mirari Vos was written against. So Pius IX never knew the world that existed before the revolution. I mean, that's we're already at that point. But he came up and rose up in the church the slow way. He was first archbishop. He was first an archbishop of Spoleto, and then he became archbishop of Imola. And basically, everywhere he went, he gathered this reputation that made him seem really different from Gregory. Gregory the 16th was austere, combative, unyielding, whereas Pius IX was warm, known to be very charitable, as in giving, not
very pastoral, right? Like that's what they describe as very pastoral.
Yeah, there's stuff I read, and I don't know how accurate it is, and or maybe how much of a liberal bent it had, but a lot of like describing him as being really giving to the poor, whereas the other cardinals at the time weren't. And how true that is, it's hard to say. I don't know. But they almost described him a lot like the way the media described Francis.
Yeah,
humble, right? And
well, he was super merciful too. Like there was like, especially with some of the more revolutionary type figures who like he was. So I mean, Rob will probably get into that, but I don't want to steal his thunder. But like there's revolutionaries happening, and he, where everybody else wanted that tough love approach, he was just like super forgiving of things. And
yeah, so when he's Archbishop of Spoleto, he's there during the 1831 revolts that we talked about last week, which triggered Gregory to write Mirari Vos. Gregory had called in Austrian troops into the Papal States to put down the revolt in his territories. Pius IX didn't. He actually went out to the rebels personally, talked to them in person, and convinced them all to lay down their arms. Then, not only was he able to get pardons for those rebels from the temporal rulers of Spoleto, but he actually personally gave them all money to travel back to wherever they came from, wherever their home was. So he dealt with those 1831 revolts really differently than Gregory. That's the reputation he was building. In Imola, he was known for visiting prisons often. He personally ran programs for street children. He personally donated money to improve roads and other infrastructure. But at the same time, he was known to reject radical liberalism. And he wanted what he called a Christian golden mean. He wanted a way for the church to engage the modern world without fully surrendering to it. But Gregory XVI dies in June of 1846. And the cardinals all locked themselves in a conclave. Back then, it was done at what's called the Coronal Palace. But the heart.
You don't do it in the Sistine Chapel?
No, not then.
Wow.
Coronal Palace, maybe, I'm not sure. But the cardinals were divided. They had the hardline conservatives called the Zelanti, and they were pushing a Cardinal Lamborghini, and that was Gregory XVI's Secretary of State, so his kind of heir apparent. The radical liberal cardinals on the other side were pushing for a Cardinal Gizzi. But after 4 ballots, neither side was close to winning. So the radical liberals decided to forget about Cardinal Gizzi, and they decided to put their support behind what they considered a moderate compromise, who was the 54-year-old Archbishop from Imola, Ferretti. Ferretti hadn't even a campaign for the papacy at all. And once it became clear he was going to win, he like very emotionally tried to say no way. But he did end up accepting. And he took the name Pius IX in honor of his personal friend, Pius VII, who was one of the 2 popes that Napoleon had imprisoned.
So wait, so he gets elected in 1846, right?
1846, yes.
Now what's surrounding this time period is Our Lady appearing in Lourdes is what, 1852 or something. So it's like
1858.
it's that far, far down the road. So
Yep.
and when is this? When is Quanta Cura written?
So Quanta Cura is released in 64, on the 10th anniversary of when Pius IX declares the Immaculate Conception to be dogma.
So and then when is the Feast of the Immaculate Conception instituted as December 8th is my question.
On December 8th of 1854.
So that's when
day.
the feast. That's when the Feast of the Immaculate. Okay, so because
Yes.
he releases Quanta Cura on the Feast of the Immaculate Conception
On the 10th
anniversary of it.
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
wow, that's really interesting.
Yep. So yeah, he takes the name Pius IX, and he starts to govern exactly as the liberals hoped and thought he would. He starts by granting a general amnesty to political prisoners. He eases restrictions on the Jews in Rome and in the Papal States. He allows railways into the Papal States and starts building gas streetlights, which was apparently like a big liberal project at the time. And those are all things that Gregory XVI refused on principle. Gregory
Yeah,
the
but wait,
16th.
didn't Gregory the 16th write about like electricity is being invented and about those gas streetlights? I think Gregory the 16th warned us that with like streetlights and things like that, we will cease to wonder at the stars. Which Pope wrote about that?
Let me take a look.
There's actually I think it was Gregory the 16th warned us about, because electricity is coming around. And,
Yeah. So yeah, when Gregory the 16th becomes Pope in 1831, he bans gas streetlights and telegraph lines. I'm just reading a quick summary, but it says he believes streetlights would promote commerce and empower the middle class, eventually leading to demands for liberal reforms. But there was theological argument saying that lighting up the night defied natural delineation between night and day established by God.
Yeah, well, look, not even like, you just think about what it's like Rob, you live out in the middle of nowhere, so you still get to gaze up at the stars.
I live in one of the only places, like, we're not really east of the Mississippi, we're north, but one of the only places in like the eastern half of the U.S. that's a dark sky sanctuary or whatever.
Yeah, like you'll see the northern lights by you on occasion, right?
Northern Lights, Milky Way's easily visible. Yeah, all of it.
Yeah, so I live in a place with such light pollution that if I get out to the country somewhere and see the stars, I just look up and wonder. And I think there's something to man having that time where he would just gaze up at the stars and set his imagination free. And I mean, so
Yeah.
Pius the liberals will be here drowning out the stars. I don't know.
And Gregory the 16th had called railroads the roads to hell, and banned them, but Pius embraced them, and he was the first pope to travel on train.
Yeah, I like Gregory the 16th. I gotta look more into this.
I was gonna say, right?
Awesome, man. I kind of like Gregory the 16th.
Pius IX relaxes laws on the press. We know what we read in Mirari Vos about the press under Gregory the 16th. He starts to appoint what people considered liberals to the government in the Papal States. And basically, like, the streets of Rome are like cheering. The Italian nationalists are putting his picture in their windows. They're, in the streets, they're chanting Viva Pio Nono, long live Pius IX. And the conservatives at that time, for 2 years, the conservatives are thinking that the most dangerous man to the Catholic Church was the Pope, from 1846 to 1848. And then the revolutions of 1848 happened. And just like what we saw in 1831 with Gregory, we see with 1848 and Pius. So yeah, if 1830 was the year that forced Mirari Vos, 1848 is the year that made the Syllabus of Errors inevitable. The revolution ignites all across Europe. like a wildfire. Paris falls again. Vienna falls to the rebels. Berlin is having issues. Milan rose against the Austrians. Milan was under Austrian leadership at the time. Hungary tries to break away from the Austrians. Basically, every Catholic monarchy on the entire continent is fighting for its life in 1848. And in Rome, Pius, who the liberals all loved, found out exactly how much their love was worth, as many liberals have. Even today, liberals tend to eat their own.
Yeah, devour their own.
Right, exactly. So in
So like
1848,
all this mercy and clemency that Pius is showing to these people, it ends up coming back and biting him in the ass. And he's like, man, you give these people an inch and they take a mile.
yeah. So in 1848, they demand a constitution. They demand this is, I think, in Italy as a whole, not just in the papal states. They demand a constitution. They demand war against Austria. They demand the unification of Italy. Pius IX had really been a reformer, for better or worse, up to that point, but he refuses to declare basically, what they're thinking is a holy war on Catholic Empire. That's what the revolutionaries want, and he says no. So they turn on him. And on November 15th of 1848, his prime minister of the Papal States, basically his civilian governor of the Papal States, Count Pellegrino Rossi, walks up the steps of the Parliament and is assassinated. A young revolutionary who was part of a plot by Roman Republican societies, probably mostly like the secret societies like Masons and so on. In broad daylight in front of witnesses, drives a dagger into the neck of Rossi, and Rossi bleeds out in front of everyone on the marble. And when Pius hears about this, he declares that Rossi has died a martyr of duty. And then the very next day, an armed mob surrounds the Quirinal Palace, and they open fire on the windows and actually kill one of the Pope's advisors. They demand that he hands the government of the Papal States over to these revolutionaries. And it gets so bad that a week later, on November 24th, which happens to be my birthday, Pius IX puts on just a simple, like the cassock of a simple priest. He climbs into a carriage in disguise, and he has to flee Rome under cover of darkness. He doesn't stop until he reaches Gaeta, which is located across the border of the Papal States and is in the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. So he flees not even just Rome; he flees the Papal States entirely.
This puts so much of Cardinal Manning's book into perspective for me. Like learning this, because Cardinal Manning's fear is that they're going to chase the Pope out of Rome, and the city of Rome is going to return to its pagan ways. Is anybody else having trouble with the sound? I hear
anyone having issues?
Like Cardinal Manning is, when he's writing the current crisis of the Holy See, the present crisis of the Holy See, he's seeing the Pope being chased out of Rome because he's living among these revolutions that are happening. And it's like, you really do kind of need the historical context to understand why these men are writing the things that they're writing.
Someone says this would make a great movie. I don't know why Hollywood seems to make the same movie 40 times over nowadays. Like, history is just full of things that would make amazing movies.
Yeah. Especially like church history. Church history would be so freaking awesome. I can hear Anthony, but the sound is good other than that.
The sound is terrible. I can hear Ant loud and clear. Oh, man. Okay, so yeah, he flees to the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies. So the man that the whole world he called the liberal Pope is now the exiled Pope, basically. He was hunted out of his own capital by basically the same people that he had found pardons for, less than 2 decades before this. So 15 years before this, he's getting pardons for these people, and now they're literally like hunting him as he flees Rome.
Yeah.
In February of the next year, so a few months later, the revolutionaries declare what they call the Roman Republic. They suppress all religious orders. They seize all church property. They march into the convents and throw out the nuns. They turned all the monasteries into barracks. I'm reading about the Spanish Civil War right now, and like these are things like the communists are doing in Spain in the 1930s.
Yeah,
these are things that you read that
so it's always like the suppression of the monasteries, right? And
Yes.
it's typically because they want to loot them and take every anything of value out of them. But it really is kind of nuts how you're seeing those attacks coming from the outside, and then you watch the Francis papacy, and Francis is the one shutting down the monasteries and stuff. It's just I'm telling all the things that you're learning about from these popes, especially Gregory and Pius, so far that I'm learning. It's like they're warning us about this impending thing that's coming, and the very thing they're warning us about is like the thing that's proclaimed by the church now. It's really, really kind of twisted the way things worked out.
What year was the Jesuits reinstated? That's a good question. Let me take a look.
Actually, just read about that. Yeah, because the suppression of the Jesuits
1814.
It was
by
before,
Pius
before all
VII.
of this. Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, in February of 49, they declare the Roman Republic. Pius is in the Two Sicilies, and he excommunicates the leaders of the Roman Republic at this point. Then that summer, Napoleon III, Napoleon III is an interesting character. On one hand, he starts as a leader of the president of the French Republic, but then basically declares, a second like Napoleonic Empire. So he's not really Catholic, but he wants to kind of be seen as a protector of the church. He's an interesting character, but that summer he sends troops to retake Rome. So they retake Rome in July of 1849. But Pius doesn't feel comfortable enough to return there until April of 1850. And when he comes back, he's entirely changed. He had given the liberals everything they wanted. He had given them amnesty, press laws, reforms. He even gave them, like we said, money out of his own pocket. And they repaid him by stabbing his prime minister in the throat and driving him out of Rome with a mob. So, if he walked into Gaeta as a liberal, he comes back into Rome as a counter-revolutionary.
It's kind of funny because you read about him giving like more freedom to the press and stuff, and then in Quanta Cura, he's like flipping out about the pamphlets and all the press and all the things that are going on again, because Gregory saw that what it was going to be, and that's why he's laying down, and he's talking about putting out limits on what Catholics are allowed. Like they have the banned book list and all these different things. Pius comes in and he loosens that stuff up a bit, and it comes back to haunt them. You can never satiate liberals, because even modern liberals, right? There's no end to the revolution. It's
that whole idea of progress, right? Progress must progress.
Yeah, there's no like set of things that they want that you can satiate and say, okay, like set a baseline. This is what we'll give you what you want, then we'll work from that. No, there is no. It'll just be enough. It happened with the civil rights movement, and then it goes to the gay rights movement, then it goes to the trans rights. Like they'll find something new, and next it'll be pedophilia. That'll never end until there's just total anarchy and debauchery. That's really what their ultimate goal is.
Yeah. So if 1848 seemed bad, the next 16 years between 1848 and 1864, it just gets worse. So if 1848 broke Pius IX personally, the next 16 years broke the Papal States basically systematically. And this was all done by the Risorgimento, which is Italian for resurgence. It was basically the project to unify and unite the entire Italian peninsula under a liberal nationalist state. The driving force behind it was the Kingdom of Piedmont and Sardinia, who had a Freemason king, Victor Emmanuel II, a Freemason prime minister, Count Camillo di Cavour, and eventually ends up having a Freemason guerrilla general named Giuseppe Garibaldi. And the biggest thing, the two things standing in their way, were Austria and the Papal States. At this point, the Papal States had existed in some form or fashion for over 1,000 years. They go back to the 8th century, and they were granted a Pope Stephen II around the year 750 by the father of Charlemagne, Pepin the Short. And, you know, I think a lot of people, especially Protestants or liberal Catholics, they don't really understand what the Papal States really were or why they were so important to the Pope. They weren't just like real estate, or they weren't a way for him to make money or to rule over people. They were the way that the popes guaranteed their independence, their spiritual independence. Because without them, whoever ruled the area Rome was in held the Pope, was basically able to hold the Pope hostage.
Yeah, the agreement they eventually come to with giving the Vatican, like the Vatican is the smallest country in the world, essentially, right? So they eventually settle on, okay, we're going to give you just the Vatican, and the Vatican walls are where at least the Pope still has that. But it also is it's to show that the Pope does have temporal power, right? Like there's something about like the way in which church and state operate, that the Pope having papal states kind of shows the proper order, where the Pope should have some kind of temporal power and spiritual power.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Which is why the liberals hate that idea so much. But so in 1860, the Piedmontese eventually finally crossed the border into the Papal States. Papal army is pretty small and outnumbered, and it's made up of volunteers, basically. These are the Papal Zouaves that are somewhat famous today. They're all volunteers. I mean, and most of them were largely from Ireland. There were a lot from Ireland. There were some from America, American Irish that volunteered, but they're a small volunteer army that are fighting, a more professional, larger source. So they end up getting crushed at the Battle of Castelfidardo in September of 1860. And within weeks after that, Piedmont basically has most of the Papal States. The Pope ends up being left with Rome and just a small strip of territory around it. And he was only left that much because there were still French troops in the city protecting it, at least trying to keep it somewhat independent. And in every territory that Piedmont took, they used the exact same playbook. They confiscated church property, they suppressed the monasteries, they expelled the religious orders, they got rid of church marriage and replaced it with civil marriage. They got rid of Catholic schools, replaced them with secular schools.
This is such an important facet to this, right? Like especially us in America with public schools. Like you're going to see Pius ranting about how they want to infect children from the earliest of ages, right? Like if you really wanted to, all this talk about America first and all these different things that you see, these political movements, if you don't teach children their heritage, like this history that we are going through right now, like without teaching children and all Christians that what the Roman Empire looks like before Christ and how the Christian faith transforms the world. Like if you don't add that element into history to teach children their heritage, like you're poisoning them from the beginning. Now the kids going into school, what are they learning about? They're learning about the civil rights movement. They're learning about the freaking Holocaust. Like these are the things that modern children are taught are the foundation of their being.
Those are the things that conservatives teach modern children.
Yeah.
Let alone what the crazy progressives teach these days.
Yeah, even like when you see like this whole the 1776 movement, we're going to teach children about American history. It's like you're never going to keep a Christian nation if you don't teach Christians their heritage and their inheritance. If you don't understand how Christ transformed the world, you don't even know you don't know what is on the horizon to return, because you don't even know what Christ conquered. And that's really what we're facing today, that nobody understands the pagan world, and the pagan world is encroaching back upon us.
Yeah. And then the big thing that that Piedmont did was they by law reduced Catholicism from the religion of the people to just one private option among many. So they basically introduced by law religious liberty.
Yeah.
So this is in 1860, and they do, they do all these things then, starting in 1860. In September of 1864, so that just 3 months before Quanta Cura is released, France and Italy sign what they call the September Convention. France agreed to withdraw its troops from Rome within 2 years, and Italy promised in return not to attack what was left of the papal territory. Pius saw it as a death warrant, basically. France was the only thing standing between him and the revolutionaries, and he didn't think the Kingdom of Italy's promise was worth the paper it was written on.
Yeah, this is why, like, France was always seen as the eldest daughter of the church, right? France, but I don't know, because you go back and France marched on Rome during the Borgia papacy, though. Like,
well,
it is
yeah,
kind of
and you have
some
the
of the things.
Avignon papacy.
Yeah.
I mean, there's really every Catholic kingdom has a pretty complex relationship with the church, but yeah, so like I said, that's in September. So think about where Pius is sitting in the fall of 1864 as he starts to write this encyclical. It's been 16 years since his prime minister was assassinated. It's been 4 years since he watched his own volunteer army cut down in battle. And it's only 3 months since a treaty that basically sealed Rome's fate. And every other government in Europe at this time is basically also methodically disassembling the church under the banner of liberalism. So that's where, like, the political situation is sitting as this encyclical and as the syllabus is released. But there's a whole nother story about what's happening in the church at this time too.
Real quick, so a lot of people are tuning in, and like, I thought you guys started at 8. So Rob and I are playing around with the idea of starting at 7 from now on. So if you're just tuning in, there may be nights where we push to 8 because I may get home from work late, or Rob may have something going on. Right. But like, I think we're going to aim for a 7 p.m. Eastern start, just because it'll, you gives
Ann more time to sleep.
Early. Yeah, it really is a lot better for me. But so just keep an eye out. It may be 7 p.m. and maybe 8 p.m. We're going to try and go for 7 though from now on. So so now what is the situation in the church you're talking about?
So just like we talked about with Gregory right before Mirari Vos, with all the stuff Gregory dealt with in 1830, his biggest problem in the was Lamennais, the priest Lamennais in the church. And it's basically almost an exact repeat of that this time around. So if you remember our Slim Jim priest named Lamennais from the last episode, he at that point had a young liberal disciple named Charles de probably Montalembert, I don't know, French name. Yeah. Montalembert, I'm just going to say. So Montalembert had gone with Lamennais to Rome as part of his newspaper, the L'Avenir, in 1832. So he was there in Rome with Lamennais when Gregory releases Mirari Vos. But unlike Lamennais, he didn't disappear. So after the condemnation, Lamennais disappears, apostatizes. Montalembert stays within the church. And now 30 years, well, nearly 30 years later, or 34 years later, he's older, he's more polished, he's more respectable, but he's preaching the exact same gospel that Lamennais preached.
Yeah.
And now there was a whole, another generation, a whole new audience that was hungry for it.
Basically preaching the Bishop Barron gospel. Hey, this is actually a good question, because this is around the time the Civil War in America is happening. Does Pius IX give any input into the American Civil War?
Well, so he did have he had quite a bit of personal correspondence with Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy. Mm-hmm. It's hard to say what some of the stories you hear how much truth there is to it, but supposedly he wrote to Jefferson Davis while Davis was in prison after the Civil War. Basically tell him to keep hope. Supposedly he calls Lincoln a tyrant in one letter.
Lincoln was a tyrant.
Lincoln was a tyrant. I
Yeah.
agree. But did he actually condemn American slavery? That's a good question.
It's just like, because you think about, because this is what's happening in Europe, and you think about the wider context, what's happening in America. You have the Civil War happening in America. Like, the world is on fire during this period, man.
So I guess in 1866, because a couple years after this, a year after the American Civil War ends, the Holy Office, in a response to a question, the Holy Office states that slavery, considered per se in itself, was, quote, by no means repugnant to the natural and divine law.
It's not, though. I mean, look,
right? I mean, incarceration in prison,
chattel slavery, they call it, like chattel slavery or something like that. That's different. Like, you could say that might be repugnant, but like, no, like slavery, especially like indentured servitude and things like that are happening in the ancient world. That's actually how people survived. They wouldn't have, without having that structure, like the peasants would have never been able to survive if they weren't servants to aristocrats and the wealthy.
Now, I guess in 1839, Pope Gregory XVI issued an apostolic letter called In Supremo Apostolatus that condemns the African slave trade.
Yeah,
but not slavery in general.
Not slavery and it's not like saying the death penalty is inadmissible.
Right,
kind of stuff you hear coming out of Rome now, right?
Yep.
Okay, so you have that. Okay, yeah. So you have the Bishop Barron of the day, and he's
So in August of 1863, so a little over a year before Quantum Cura is released, there's a Congress, a Catholic Congress in Belgium. And if you remember, Belgium was created only 30 years before this, right before Gregory XVI. So, but anyways, at a Catholic Congress in Belgium, this priest, Mantum, I hate French names, but this new priest stands up in front of the Congress, and he gives two famous speeches. And basically, his two thesis, or his thesis in both speeches, and these are his words. His thesis is a free church and a free state. And basically, he argued that the church should give up on monarchy. It should stop trying to preserve any sort of confessional state. And it should embrace religious liberty as a civil right. It should embrace separation of church and state, and embrace liberal democracy. He
literally
argued that
everything they did in the council, right? So this is why the society is making such a big deal. Like, this is why Lefebvre goes nuts over religious liberty. It's like all the things the popes are condemning. Because I remember listening to I used to listen to this podcast with these priests. I'm talking back in the day podcast before like any video or anything. Catholic Stuff You Should Know. It was a podcast I used to listen to. It was like right, it was like early on in my reversion. I'm coming back and I'm just looking for Catholic stuff to listen to. And it was these two guys in seminary, and I remember them talking about this period when the Pope loses the papal states. And they're like, well, maybe, in hindsight, I guess that was a good thing, because the Pope should only be, and I don't know why I'm mocking the way they're talking, but the Pope should really just be in control of spiritual matters, and he should not have any say over like temporal affairs like that. And that is what eventually ends up coming to be the normative thinking in the church. But it was never that way, because there's such a close relationship between church and state for centuries and centuries. And this is the time period where there's revolutions happening everywhere. They're throwing away monarchy. There is no more confessional states. It's just revolution upon revolution. The whole world is shifting towards democracy, and they want the Pope to stay in Rome. And go ahead, you could tell people they have to do this on Sunday, but don't interfere with these temporal affairs. And you still see it freaks people out when the Pope says anything about temporal affairs, which is why Trump lost his mind a couple of weeks
exactly. It's a good point. Like, on the political spectrum, like both sides of the American political spectrum are in error, when it comes to this sort of subject. But yeah, so Montalembert was basically saying that the church didn't need any sort of privilege; it just needed freedom, that it would thrive under freedom. So it was basically exactly what Lamennais before Gregory was saying. It was all that all over again. It was the same poison, just in a new bottle. But like Gregory, Pius IX was watching.
Rob, do you know anything about this? I don't even know what this is a reference to. So the miracle of 1849, miracle of the Vatican,
I haven't heard of it.
Veronica's veil became miraculously enlivened for 3 hours. I've never even heard of that. It's interesting that this is in this time period though. There's so much going on because you all I think that the Marian dogma is being proclaimed under Pius IX, because especially when we get into the encyclical,
on January 6th in 1849, the image of Christ on St. Veronica's veil in St. Peter's Basilica became vivid, glowing, and lifelike for 3 hours. This is while Pius IX was in exile. So it happened on Epiphany,
right?
3 hours. It happened for 3 hours on Epiphany. On the Epiphany, right after Pius is forced to, escape from Rome.
Wow, I never even heard about that. Yeah, the Holy Face devotion comes from that.
Now, this little thing I'm reading here, it doesn't say when in the day, but it would not surprise me if it's from 12 to 3. I would imagine, right?
Yeah, I don't know. I never even heard of that. But yeah, it's just this whole. Man, you're watching the whole world just feels so unsteady. This is why there's so much apocalyptic fervor during this time period. The Protestant and Catholic wars are popping off. Then you have all these revolutions happening where they're throwing off monarchy in every single place. And you're seeing the dissolution of Christendom in this time period. Like, it's just completely dissolving. Christendom is just completely dissolving. And the new, like the way the church will approach the world changes at Vatican II because of all of these events. Like, these events are the things that lead to the church saying, okay, let's throw off the prophets of doom, because all of these popes are like, the world is going to end. This is nuts. What are we doing here? And
well, except the popes really aren't saying that, though.
Not saying the world's going to end, but they're Rob, they're
warning.
Very much warning that we are looking at a level of evil on our doorstep right now, that everyone is just trying to throw off the yoke of Christ the King. Like, that's what the popes are seeing. They're seeing the whole world in revolution, and they all want to throw off the yoke of Christ the King. And the popes are saying, no, take his yoke on. His yoke is light. And if you want your state to survive, you need the Catholic faith. Like, that's really what they're saying, especially in this encyclical. Pius IX is saying, if you want your state to survive, you need your children to be Catholic. It is the thing that will keep peace in your nation. All these revolutions are happening. Like, he's talking to the kings, and he's talking to those in authority. And he's like, you don't know what you're inviting into your doorstep with these revolutions.
I'm just seeing if there's any. That's basically the end of the history. I mean, so
yeah. So let's get into Quanta Cura now, because I mean, it took up 50 minutes. So let's get into Quanta Cura. It's like, so there's a couple of things I have highlighted that I want to jump into. The first one, I mean, this whole encyclical you could just highlight and read, but just the presence the popes speak with back then is just so like jarring. It's in part 2, in paragraph 2, Rob. We raised our voice, and in many published encyclical letters and allocutions delivered in consistory and other apostolic letters, we condemn the chief errors of this most unhappy age, and we excited your admirable episcopal vigilance, and we again and again admonished and exhorted all sons of the Catholic Church, to us most dear, that they should altogether abhor and flee from the contagion of so dire a pestilence, and especially in our first encyclical letter written to you on November 9th, 1846, and in 2 allocutions delivered by us in consistory those dates, We condemn the monstrous portents of opinion which prevail, especially in this age, bringing with them the greatest loss of souls and detriment of civil society itself, which are grievously opposed also not only to the Catholic Church and her salutary doctrine of venerable rights, but also to the eternal natural law engraven by God in all men's hearts, and to right reason, and from which almost all other errors have their origin. Like, he is seeing the things that are happening in the world, and he's seeing the poison that's coming to the children of the church, and he's like, it's something you almost don't see in the modern popes. Like, the modern popes, when they write an encyclical, they're writing to the world, where these popes are like, my Catholic children who are most dear to me, they're so concerned with the souls of the baptized Catholics.
One thing to note, this is still in the age where encyclicals are basically being written to the bishops. It starts off saying basically it's to all patriarchs, primates, archbishops, and bishops. So we're not yet at the point where they address the whole world. I highlighted it, basically exactly what you highlighted, just mostly, and like you said, because of the language. It's just not language. It's, we hear in modern Vatican documents. And so he mentions a couple other writings he had done previous. And I just wanted to say that we chose to do this one, and this will be the only one under Pius IX, because the syllabus is actually a collection of errors he condemns in all his previous writings. So like this encyclical and this syllabus basically is a summary of his entire pontificate. So
did you have anything highlighted before paragraph 4?
Yes. No, 4 as in liberty of conscience.
Like, once you get to paragraph 4, I mean, I didn't want to highlight the entire, I didn't want to just read the entire encyclical because I think it would take too much time, but there's just so much in here. So
in paragraph 3, I highlighted the section of liberty of conscience. So it says, for you well know, venerable brethren, that at this time men are found not a few who, applying to civil society the impious and absurd principle of naturalism, as they call it, dare to teach that the best constitution of public society and also civic progress altogether require that human society be conducted and governed without regard being had to religion any more than if it did not exist, or at least without any distinction being made between the true religion and false ones.
That's
and I could read that whole paragraph.
Yeah, that you really, it's like, he goes down, he says that liberty of conscience and worship is each man's personal right, which ought to be legally proclaimed and asserted in every rightly constituted society, and that a right resides in the citizens to an absolute liberty, which should be restrained by no authority, whether ecclesiastical or civil, whereby they may be openly and publicly to manifest and declare any of their ideas whatever, either by word of mouth, by the press, or in any other way. But while they rashly affirm this, they do not think and consider that they are preaching liberty of perdition. He's like, you people, you think you're preaching liberty of conscience, you're just going to hell, right? Like, that's what he's saying. You want the liberty to damn your souls. And that if human arguments are always allowed free room for discussion, there will never be wanting men who will dare to resist truth and to trust in the flowing speech of human wisdom, whereas we know from the very teaching of our Lord Jesus Christ how carefully Christian faith and wisdom should avoid this most injurious babbling. Man, he's amazing.
Like the whole idea of like a free market of ideals. He's like, no, it's all just injurious babbling.
Yeah, and you're going to hell. Like, he's literally telling everybody you're going to hell. And since where religion has been removed from the civil society and the doctrine and authority of divine revelation repudiated, the genuine notion itself of justice and human right is darkened and lost. And the place of true justice and legitimate right is supplied by material force. Thence it appears why it is that some, utterly neglecting and regarding the surest principles of sound reason, dare to proclaim that the people's will manifested by what is called public opinion, or in some other way constitute a supreme law free of all divine and human control, and that the political order accomplished facts from the very circumstances that they are accomplished have a force of right.
The idea of people voting laws into existence, or Congress creating laws that like two men can be married. He's just saying no, that the people's will cannot constitute a supreme law.
Yeah. It's really interesting when you get into like the understanding of like a people who were formed before this time period. You didn't need all of these laws because people were just genuinely good Christians, right? So like you had laws for murder and things like that, but like all of the laws, think about how many laws there are. It's got like Congress is always gathering to enact new laws and new laws and new laws, and they just keep putting laws down and laws down and laws down. But it's like the period before this, men just knew from right reason and good conscience what to do and what not to do. This is what I highlighted. But who does not see and clearly perceive that human society, when set loose from the bonds of religion and true justice, can have in truth no other end than the purpose of obtaining and amassing wealth, and that society under such circumstances follows no other law in its actions except the unchastened desire of ministering to its own pleasures and interests?
Yeah, I had that exact paragraph highlighted there.
For this reason, men of the kind pursue with bitter hatred the religious orders, although these have deserved extremely well of Christendom, civilization, and literature, and cry out that the same have no legitimate reason for being permitted to exist. And thus these evil men applaud the calumnies of heretics. For as Pius VI, our predecessor, taught most wisely, the abolition of regulars is injurious to the state in which the evangelical counsels are openly professed. It is injurious to the method of life praised in the church as agreeable to apostolic doctrine. It is injurious to the illustrious founders themselves, whom we venerate on our altars, who did not establish these societies but God's inspirations, whereby they may openly give alms for the sake of Christian charity, and that the law should be abrogated, whereby on certain fixed days servile works are prohibited because of God's worship, and on the most deceptive pretext that the said permission and law are opposed to the principles of the best public economy. Moreover,
you really did highlight the whole thing.
Well, this section specifically,
this next section I highlighted here.
Well, specifically because like we're coming up on Holy Thursday, not Holy Thursday, on Ascension Thursday, and it's a holy day of obligation, and we have to work. And if it was a Jewish holiday, everyone would be off. But because it's Ascension Thursday, the bishops today are like, oh, let's just move it to the Sunday.
My local parish doesn't even have a mass available that day at all.
It's still a holy day of obligation in my diocese, but that's like a rarity these days. They just move it to the Sunday, and don't worry about it. We'll just celebrate Ascension Thursday on Sunday. And it's like, this is what he's talking about here. He's like,
this next section is something that like, even to our day, they haven't yet fully, the liberals haven't fully gotten to, but like they're working on it.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I got through the fix.
So it says, okay. Moreover, not content with removing religion from public society, they wish to banish it also from private families. For teaching and professing the most fatal errors of communism and socialism, they assert that domestic society or the family derives the whole principle of its existence from the civil law alone, and consequently, that on civil law alone depend all rights of parents over their children, and especially that of providing for education, by which impious opinions and machinations these most deceitful men chiefly aim at this result, that the salutary teaching and influence of the Catholic Church may be entirely banished from the instruction and education of youth, and that the tender and flexible minds of young men may be infected and depraved by every most pernicious error and vice. For all who have endeavored to throw into confusion things both sacred and secular, and to subvert the right order of society, and to abolish all rights, human and divine, have always, as we above hinted, devoted all their nefarious schemes, devices, and efforts to deceiving and depraving incautious youth, and have placed all their hope in its corruption.
This is like, because you just don't hear the popes talking about this anymore. I mean, we just watched Michael Hitchborn doing a series about how Pope Francis and Leo are entertaining like these communists in the Vatican and stuff. It's like the church has just totally let her guard down, completely dismissed the real dangers that are on our doorstep. Even Leo recently talking about the gay issue in the church and stuff, and he's like, well, I think that there are many other pressing issues that we really should. It's like we've never needed a pope to come out and preach to the Catholic faithful on the dangers of sexual immorality with the rampant usage of pornography now. Even get away from the same sex stuff. Just talk about like young kids being exposed to pornographic images, so much so that it's like destroying these people's lives. We're seeing kids are no longer getting married anymore. Like if you go back even 30 years, like 85% of under 30 were married, and you're looking at it now, it's like 16% of men and 18% of women are married under 30. We are watching the collapse of the institution of marriage. In this encyclical, he's talking about how they're getting rid of the sacrament of marriage and replacing it with civil marriage. Like the idea that, like, you think about all of the problems we're looking at in our culture today, and they all stem from these things that the popes are warning about in this time period.
150 years ago.
The popes in our current, and like the modern popes are just freaking clueless. Like at least John Paul II talked about this stuff a little bit, and Benedict talked about it a little bit, but from Francis and Leo are just oblivious to the dangers facing our children and our family. It's like there's never been a more important time for you fathers to step up to the plate and make sure you're having the most important conversations in the world with your children. I'm telling you, I could tell you, there's a story about, did you see the story about the girl from Alabama? She was going to school down in Alabama, and she was dating some guy in a frat, and they broke up, and the guy was like showing their sex tapes to all his friends, and he was going to put them on a site, and the girl goes and confronts him, and he beats the crap out of the girl. Now the girl's from Long Island. Her father is a Long Island cop. He's a Nassau cop. He goes down to Alabama and beats the crap out of this kid.
Should have killed him.
Now the cop is facing assault and battery, and he's about to lose his job on Long Island. I know the family. And I'm like, on one hand, like he'd be a bad father if he didn't go and do what he did.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, if he was a good father, his daughter never would have ended up in that position to begin with.
It's true too. Yeah.
Like his daughter would never have ended up in that position to begin with. She's down there with frat guys doing the things that she's doing. It's like, that's insane to me that he'll go down and he'll beat the crap out of the guy. But like his daughter was just left totally unprepared for this. And man, I got to be careful what I say because we're public, but the family, like the mother's over there, like prancing around half naked on her Instagram. It's like, this is the degeneracy that is facing our children. Right. And the Pope is just, we should move past these things. Let's talk about peace and the brotherhood of man.
Men really do. Fathers really have it tough when it comes to stuff like this. Like if you do anything to try to prevent stuff like that, you're ostracized by society, right? As some over the top, abusive, controlling freak, basically.
Yeah.
Oh,
man, it's nuts. Like the pressures that it's just not easy to raise kids these days, man. Like the kids' phones are taking control of them. They're being raised by everyone. This is what the Pope is talking about. Like they want to trap your children from their youth. They're taking your children from their youth. And yeah, we're talking about programs in schools and stuff, but do you know the filth that is being taught even in Catholic schools today?
Especially in Catholic schools.
Yeah, it's like it's no better. You think you're going to send your kid to a Catholic school, and it's no freaking better. It is just insane what has happened, man. The next thing I have highlighted, because I didn't want to highlight the whole freaking encyclical, is down towards the bottom of paragraph 5.
Okay, I have the top of a short portion of the top highlighted.
Go ahead.
I'll read that, and then you read the bottom.
Yeah.
So this is church authority subverted by civil authorities. Others, meanwhile, reviving the wicked and so often condemned inventions of innovators, dare with signal imprudence to subject to the will of the civil authority, the supreme authority of the church, and of this apostolic see given to her by Christ himself, to deny all those rights of the same church and see which concern matters of the external order.
Just that paragraph, just like this see was given by Christ himself, right? Like the authority that the Pope spoke with back then, man. Like what you have now is like this timid, reluctant Pope. He's like, he's timid and reluctant. He's like, oh no, we don't want to offend anybody, you know. We just want, let's just be everybody, just get along. Let's just, you know, like there's nothing commanding and demanding of Christ. Like Christ is just everybody, just be nice to each other. The Church of Nice. I mean, I hate saying that phrase, Michael Voris coined it, but it really is the Church of Nice, as if niceness ever saved anybody. I think Williamson said that, oh, let's just everybody be nice to one another. Nobody ever went to heaven because they were nice. I jumped all the way down and I said, nor can we pass over in silence the audacity of those who, enduring sound doctrine, contend without sin and without any sacrifice of the Catholic profession, assent and concern the church's general good and her rights and discipline. So only it does not touch the dogmata of faith and morals, but no one can be found not clearly and distinctly to see and understand how grievously this is opposed to the Catholic dogma of the full power given from God by Christ, our Lord himself, to the Roman pontiff of feeding, ruling, and guiding the universal church. Amidst, therefore, such great perversity and depraved opinions, we, while remembering our apostolic office and greatly solicitous for our most holy religion, for sound doctrine and the salvation of souls, which is entrusted to us by God, and solicitous also for the welfare of human society itself, have thought it right again to raise up our apostolic voice. Therefore, by our apostolic authority, we reprobate, proscribe, and condemn all the singular and evil opinions and doctrines severally mentioned in this letter, and will command that they be thoroughly held by all children of the Catholic Church as reprobated, proscribed, and condemned. Like, so, yeah.
I had that portion highlighted too, and the question that came to my mind while reading that is, does this part of the encyclical reach the level necessary for infallibility? Like he is saying, I mean, what you just said there, we reprobate, prescribe, and condemn
with authority, right? Like he is
command that they be thoroughly held by all children of the Catholic Church. Like, I don't know, that almost seems like it's ex cathedra. Don't I mean, I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm not
I don't know if it meant the specific things, but I mean, it's just how he would speak back then. Man, I have like half of paragraph 7 highlighted. I have all of paragraph 8 highlighted, and then I have paragraph 11.
Part of the end of paragraph 8 highlighted. Do you want to read anything before that?
Or? Yeah, wait. Nor are you ignorant also that in this age some men are found who, moved and excited by the spirit of Satan, have reached to that degree of impiety as not to shrink from denying our ruler and Lord Jesus Christ, and from impugning his divinity with wicked pertinacity. Here, however, we cannot but extol you, venerable brethren, with great and deserved praise for not having failed to raise with all zeal your episcopal voice against this impiety so great. Therefore, in this our letter, we again most lovingly address you, who have been called unto a part of our solicitude, are to us among our grievous distress the greatest solace, joy, and consolation, because of the admirable religion and piety wherein you excel, and because of that marvelous love, fidelity, and dutifulness whereby, bound as you are to us and to this apostolic see in most harmonious affection, you strive strenuously and sedulously to fulfill your most weighty episcopal ministry. From your signal pastoral zeal, we expect that, taking up the sword of the Spirit, which is the word of God, and strengthened by the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, you will, with redoubled care each day, more anxiously provide that the faithful entrusted to your charge abstain from noxious verbiage, which Jesus Christ does not cultivate, because it is not his Father's plantation.
Towards the end of that paragraph, I have highlighted, do not fail to teach that the royal power was given not only for the governance of the world, but most of all for the protection of the church. that there is nothing which can be of greater advantage and glory to princes and kings than if, as another most wise and courageous predecessor of ours, Saint Felix, instructed the Emperor Zeno, they permit the Catholic Church to practice her laws and allow no one to oppose her liberty.
Yeah. Yeah, the last thing I highlighted was basically paragraph 11, just because like
Yeah, I have that highlighted too.
just because even at this time, like even where we are today, this statement stands. Even more, I mean, not that anything else doesn't stand. Every single thing does. Yeah. Noxious verbiage is a banger podcast.
Someone text that to Kale. That sounds like the Kale podcast.
It's first off, just you see the total love that the popes had for the Blessed Mother, man. Like they're just so awesome. Let us implore, venerable brethren, God's mercy for our inmost heart and with our whole mind, because he has himself added, I will not remove my mercy from them. Let us ask and we shall receive. And if there be delay and slowness in our receiving because we have gravely offended, let us knock, because to him that knocketh it shall be opened. If only the door be knocked by our prayers, groans, and tears, in which we must persist and persevere. And if that prayer be unanimous, let each man pray to God, not for himself alone, but for all his brethren, and as the Lord hath taught us to pray, but in order that God may more readily assent to the prayers and desires of ourselves, of you and all the faithful, let us with all confidence employ as our advocate with him the Immaculate and Most Holy Virgin Mary, Mother of God, who has slain all heresies throughout the world, and who, the most loving mother of us all, is all sweet, all full of mercy, shows herself to all as easily entreated, shows herself to all as most merciful, pities the necessities of all with the most large affection, and standing as a queen at the right hand of her only begotten Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, in gilded clothing, surrounded with a variety, can obtain from him whatever she will. Let us also seek the suffrages of the most blessed Peter, Prince of the Apostles, and of Paul, his fellow apostle, and of all the saints in heaven. Just the love for Our Lady and just the trust that they put. But it goes kind of to when these men called the sex summit. Like we've talked about this before. I said, if like when they called that sex summit under Francis after the McCarrick scandal, if all of those bishops had worn sackcloth and ash and begged God's forgiveness for their sins against him, the whole world would have changed overnight. We would have had an Nineveh moment, and God would have granted such mercy upon us. But because these men are so hard of heart, because they double down on their sin and they try to justify the difference between consenting adults and abusive children, and they try to downplay the severity of the sin of sodomy, all of this stuff is what is going to bring God's wrath upon us.
Yeah.
So I think we could jump over to the Syllabus of Errors, which we definitely got to cover a few of these before we jump over to local.
There are not as many. I don't have as many highlighted as you would think. There's maybe a dozen.
I mean, look, the Syllabus of Errors is basically a list of how many are there?
There's 80
condemned errors. The majority of those condemned errors are now held like as commonplace now.
The vast majority. Yeah.
The vast majority of those errors that Pius IX condemned are just held as commonplace in the modern church. So I didn't really highlight any of the Syllabus of Errors, but Rob did. We'll do a couple of those and then we're going to head over to locals.
So just for anyone watching, these are these are statements that are condemned. So they will read as a positive. Like, you'll see what I mean as I read it, but keep in mind that Pius is condemning these ideas. So the first one I have highlighted is number 3. Human reason, without any reference whatsoever to God, is the sole arbiter of truth and falsehood, and of good and evil. It is law to itself and suffices by its natural force to secure the welfare of men and nations. So that's condemned. Number 5, divine revelation is imperfect, and therefore is subject to a continual and indefinite progress corresponding with the advancement of human reason. That's one that the liberals in the church today seem to hold to, right? That even divine revelation progresses. 12.
12.
Okay.
The decrees of the Apostolic See and Roman congregations impede the true progress of science. How often do you hear that? Oh, Galileo. Shut up with Galileo. Galileo is a moron and he was wrong.
Well, and 13 is right along there too. The method and principles by which the old scholastic doctors cultivated theology are no longer suitable to the demands of our times and to the progress of the sciences.
Even 14, philosophy is to be treated without taking any account of supernatural revelation. Like, think about all of the different philosophies that come about that they do not take. Like, philosophy is supposed to be the handmaid of theology.
Yeah.
Like, they have to go hand in hand. Awesome show, boys. Appreciate what you guys do. My grandma passed away this morning, who was like a second mom. If you could please pray for the repose of her soul. Of course, Matthew. Matthew's coming to Italy with me.
Is he?
Yeah, I've had some really good conversations with Matthew. I'm looking forward to meeting him and his wife. There's tons of stuff on socialism and communism, secret societies.
So, indifferent. There's a few really good ones on indifferentism and false tolerance. So every man is free to embrace and profess that religion, which guided by the light of reason he shall consider true. I mean, that's the popes have been saying. I mean, that's Vatican II almost is that.
Yeah,
and that's condemned. Man may, in the observance of any religion whatever, find the way of eternal salvation and arrive at eternal salvation.
Man,
I mean,
God's different religions are just different languages to God.
This one, Bishop Barron, if you're listening, it is condemned that good hope, at least, is to be entertained of the eternal salvation of all those who are not at all in the true Church of Christ. Number 18, Protestantism is nothing more than another form of the same true Christian religion, in which form it is given to please God equally as in the Catholic Church. Then I don't have one highlight till 45.
I wish look, the thing is, you had a pope who spoke like this. You had the liturgy intact. You had all of this, and it still could not hold back the forces we are dealing with today. Like, that is something that everybody, because so many of us think, oh, the council. It wasn't just the council. Like, all of this stuff is building within the church. These are movements within the church. These are priests within the church, all talking about these things. And the Pope has to correct his own priests and say, no, this stuff is because evil is infected. Look, you said it last episode. It's like, you look back to like Marshall's thesis, infiltration. You really do have to go back that far and see that this stuff started back then. And there was an infiltration. It's like, it's the same thing that's happening in our nations with illegal immigration. You're flooding the nation with all these foreigners. And what happened was, in the church, you flooded the church with these heretics. And they slowly infected the minds of the faithful with their perverse ideas. This is why there used to be a freaking Inquisition to stomp these ideas out, because they knew they would infect the minds of the people. And once the printing press is invented, it's kind of like a wildfire that the church just can't contain anymore, because it goes quickly in a pamphlet, and you can just get these ideas out. And people think they want to be freed from the yoke of the oppressive church. And it just leads to misery. Like, only those of us who have eyes of faith see this stuff as beautiful, right? And we long for the yoke of the church. Like, we're like, please bring it back, because we know it's for the good of society. Like, you need the eyes of faith to see this. But if you're a non-believer and you have the church telling you you can't do that, these people all just wanted to go out and have sex with whoever they wanted to. That's all it really comes down to. They all just wanted to go and do what they wanted. They didn't want the stupid church telling them what they could and couldn't do in the bedroom. So much about that.
You really see like the church struggle to impose and restrain this stuff when the secular powers stop cooperating. At the time of the Protestant revolt, right? And because the Protestant revolt only happens when it does, and not 100 or 200 years earlier, because the German princes wanted to be free of Rome at that point.
Yeah.
Because like what Luther was teaching wasn't a ton different than what Jan Hus was teaching, or what what is it,
Tyndale.
Tyndale, and there were other proto-Protestant heretics before Luther, but the state, the different Catholic states at the time kept them under control.
Yeah.
It was
Well,
Luther was able to
really,
find a prince that was willing to protect him.
it really does show you how miraculous the
Christendom
Catholic
was.
faith and church was to begin with, right? Because men's instinct is to be freed from, oh, don't tell me what to do. Don't tell me what to do. It really took like a ridiculous miracle to civilize man. Like, men are uncivil. Men by nature just want to go and sin. And there was something like God's spirit really covered the earth and civilized human beings for like a majority of the known world at the time. Wherever that cross was raised, freaking men just like, all right, we won't have 9 wives anymore. We'll have 1 wife, and for the most part, it worked for over 1,000 years. And it wasn't until the Protestant Reformation that you see this stuff break apart. Really was a really miraculous thing when you look to those early centuries in the church, man.
Yeah. So the next couple are all about public schools, actually.
I actually have to take this phone call.
Okay.
So
I will read through some while you're on the phone.
Okay.
Here, I'll remove you from screen. Okay, so number 45. It is condemned that the entire government of public schools in which the youth of a Christian state is educated may and ought. Are you back already?
It was my uncle. I had to take it. Sorry.
Oh, okay. So basically condemned that the entire government of public schools may and ought to appertain to the civil power and belong to it so far that no other authority shall be recognized as having any right to interfere in the discipline of the schools and arrangement of the studies, blah, blah, blah. It's condemned that the best theory of civil society requires that public schools be open to children of every class of the people, and generally all public institutes intended for instruction should be freed from all ecclesiastical authority. I'm kind of paraphrasing them here. It's condemned that Catholics may approve of the system of educating youth unconnected with Catholic faith and the power of the church, in which regards the knowledge of merely natural things, and only, or at least primarily, number 48 condemns the idea of Catholics putting their kids in public schools almost entirely.
I mean, that was the one thing I got chewed out by a priest for one time was I got chewed out by a priest for letting my kids be in public school.
Now, I mean, that was 150 years ago. This day and age, like putting them in a Catholic school isn't going to help for the most part.
Yeah. Well, that was kind of my rebuttal to the priest. I was like, well, unless I homeschool my kid, I was like, the Catholic school ain't much better. I got to be honest with you. But all right, we're gonna wrap this one. We're gonna head over to locals. What's the next encyclical, Rob? Do you know of give people homework?
Okay, I'm going to give you 2, and I need you to decide. It's either going to be Quad Apostolici Muneris, which is on socialism. It's an early critique of socialism and communism. It's often called an early building block of modern Catholic social teaching, and it is seen as leading to Rerum Novarum. So there's that one. Or it would be Aeterni Patris, which is on the restoration of Christian philosophy.
Let's do Aeterni Patris.
Well, I was going to say, if we do Quad Apostolici Muneris, we would still do Aeterni Patris after. So it depends if you really want to do that one or not.
I say we just jump into Aeterni Patris. Like, I just think that's a good.
We can't hit all of these, or this is going to be a 2-year-long series.
But what's the time period we're looking at? What is that time? What is that time period?
Fall of 1879. So it's 15 years after this.
What year is Vatican I?
Vatican I is 1870. So it's Vatican I happens, 5-6 years after this, and Aeterni Patris happens 10 years after Vatican I.
Okay, I want some historical context of Vatican I, what kind of leads to the events of Vatican I, and kind of like why it gets left off and not actually closed, right? Because there's like there's things that happen in Vatican I that they don't actually close the council. So they officially closed Vatican I at the beginning of Vatican II. So that's the time period we're going to be going into. And yeah, and we're working our way into the 20th century, especially, man. Like I'm like really interested to see how the 1900s start to work out and see this time period. So Leo the 13th, man, he's next up, and there's a lot to get to with Leo the 13th. We want Rerum Novarum to be kind of like a high point of this series. So we're not going to get there just yet. We're going to do one or two more at least before we get there.
Question. And they're not encyclicals, but would we want to do an episode in this series on the Vatican I documents?
You guys want us to just do Vatican I next
I
episode?
mean, there's going to be a lot more documents there than just an encyclical, but we could do a historical summary, and I mean, because the big
historical summary, you give the election of Pope Leo the 13th, you give the election of Pope Leo the 13th. We'll give the historical context of Vatican I, and let's definitely do that. Yeah, let's go through some of the stuff in Vatican I, some of the highlights of Vatican I. Like we'll get into papal supremacy, and we'll get into perpetuity of the chair of Peter, because that's a hard one for Sedes to answer, man.
Yeah,
like part of Vatican I, they could talk about all the things, but it's like there's perpetuity of the chair of Peter, that he will have successors.
Yeah.
In perpetuity.
Yeah,
let's do that.
Pastor Eternus is the big.
But that's after Vatican I, right?
No, Pastor Eternus is the big papal infallibility document of Vatican I, right?
So let's do that.
Yeah, okay. We'll do Vatican I next Tuesday.
Let's do that. Okay. Yeah, let's do Vatican I. All right. So everybody's saying they kind of want to learn more about Vatican I. Yeah, because everybody talks about Vatican II, but like Vatican I, like kind of sets the stage for all this stuff.
And Vatican I is kind of the victory of the Ultramontanes, like Lamennais, over the Gallicans. But not all of the Ultramontanes were liberals like Lamennais. Because you had Manning was Ultramontane, right? And he's English, but you have John Henry Newman, who he still voted for the documents of Vatican I, but
I may read a little bit of Newman, because I've never really read Newman. I picked Manning over Newman any day for canonization. I picked Cardinal Manning over Newman, if you're going to ask me. But yeah, Pastor Eternus is pretty quick, so we can definitely do that. All right, so let's do Vatican I next episode. Let's just do a deep dive into Vatican I.
Okay.
And then so listen, this Thursday is a holy day of obligation for me. And the only mass I can make it to is 7 p.m. and it's like an hour away. So I think that we're gonna skip the Thursday show, but Leo's dropping
Friday,
his first encyclical Friday. So I think we're just gonna push Thursday show to Saturday. I think that's the plan right now. So no show Thursday, and we'll push it to Saturday.
Yeah, it would have to be Saturday evening because I'm busy all day.
Me too. Yeah, I'm getting my boat all prepared. I'm going my first boat day on Sunday.
But Friday night, I should be able to prepare.
Yeah, and I'll be able to read it Friday night as I'm going to bed and stuff. And
modern encyclicals aren't like what we've been reading.
It's going to be.
They're not 15 paragraphs.
Can you send it through the AI to give me a summary?
Yeah, if they have a PDF version published, I can do that. Yeah.
All right, so that's the plan. Right now, we're going to go over. We got to discuss Pelican. Man.
Yes, we are going over to locals.
Going over to locals, yes.
Let me get the link for everyone.
Going over to locals, and yeah, man, this is.
While I do that, you want to tell everyone about locals in case they're new?
Locals is the best way to support our show. It's $5 a month, and to be honest, if you guys get in now, might be a good idea. That's what I'm saying. Rob and I've been talking.
not like we were talking about Pelican.
No, we're not leaving anywhere, but like, we're we're struggling these days, guys. But no, nothing yet. No announcements or anything yet. But we're doing locals. Locals is the best way to support the show. We do pretty much 2 locals episodes a week, and we give you guys some behind the scenes stuff. We usually do a little bit of gossip, a little bit of drama, and then stuff we can't really talk about on YouTube. Tonight we're going to do Pelican, because we got to discuss that, because the Dan 70 stuff is just out of control. And I have, dude, I also have, I have the Bishop Sheen 1947 address loaded if we want to do that. Or we have a John Deloney clip that we could do that. Can just discuss modern marriage and just women working. Either way, that's what we're gonna do on locals tonight. So you get some gossip, and then we'll discuss modern women working.
Yeah.
So that's the plan. Come over to locals. Take us out, Rob.
Hold on.
Oh, you got something special? Where else?
You guys really think I'm not slightly autistic?
No, you're not autistic. Melancholic, not autistic.
Yeah, but yet at the same time, you haven't been on one of our gun shows. I'm a little autistic when it comes to the
Nah, you're just a nerd. It's all right.
True.
You're a gun nerd. That's different.
Paul is aching at the bit.
Let's start with the Pelican drama. We'll do the Pelican drama.
Oh wait, no,
Deloney. Now I'm doing Deloney just to annoy you, Benjamin. I forgot how much I missed Deloney during my Lenten hiatus, because man, this guy pisses me off. He's my one guilty pleasure. I love to be angry at him.
Can't wait for Deloney.
That's a good suggestion. Read Unum Sanctum in the Pastor Eternus episode, because Pastor Eternus is short.
Isn't Unum the bull Unum Sanctum from 1302?
The thing is, like, I'm learning a lot of stuff. Like, forcing me to read these for the show is really cool, man. Like, I don't know. Some parts might be a little slow until we get into the rhythm, but especially when we're getting into the encyclicals, they're really like, and knowing the historical context is really freaking cool to learn. So, like I said, I hope you guys are enjoying this. It's totally different from anything we've done in a while. If you are, there's a donate button on our website, because this show is going to get about 2,000 views.
www.avoidingbabylon.com.
Yeah, this show is going to get about 2,000 views, and we don't care. Like, we would rather give something of substance to you guys for a while, and we'll see how this series goes, and then we'll find something else to do. Because it was getting like, there's only so much you can talk about the Jews. But we're going to do Leo's new encyclical Saturday. Then Rob, we'll do another episode Tuesday, and then Rob's going away for a week, so I'll have 2 guest hosts in. I'm thinking Brian Holdsworth, maybe 1 episode, and then I don't know. I got to get somebody else for the second. So that's the plan. We'll see. Maybe I'll have somebody on and fight with them. But all right, take us out, Rob. Let's go do some gossip on locals.
Start.